It's that time of year again where most of us have to add another task to our plate, and that's mowing the grass, which personally, I'd rather be doing something else with my time. Well, last year, I reviewed Mammotion's Luba 1 robotic mower, and it did a great job mowing my yard, but I could only use it to mow certain parts of my yard since it would lose connection to its navigation system if it got too close to trees. And apparently, this was one of the most complained about features the company received about the mower. Well, what I didn't know is that they were working on a solution for that problem. Once I found that out, I personally reached back out to their team to see if I could review their Luba 2 model, since overall I was still quite impressed with the Luba 1 and the amount of effort they were putting into pushing software updates to try to improve the mower overall. I'm still new to robotic mowers, but I kind of felt like at the time they were the Tesla of robotic mowers. Anyway, I finally got my hands on a Luba 2, so let's test their claims of improving the navigation issue, as well as take a look at what else is new. Now that I have everything required installed on the robotic mower, let's quickly take a closer look at the overall design. Obviously, the biggest change is the new vision module on top, but we'll get more into that later in the video. I'm still a huge fan though of the look of the mower and the fact that it looks like a race car. They did remove one of the ultrasonic sensors since the new vision module has the ability to recognize different types of obstacles. The front suspension looks about the same and functions similar to the Luba 1. There appears to be no major changes with the front Omni wheels as well. So to make the visual comparison a little easier, let's place the Luba 1 next to the Luba 2. The rear wheels are definitely different, and I'm assuming the new wheels will provide better traction. Another change is the side bumpers have been removed from the Luba 2, and from my experience, they really didn't get used at all with my Luba 1. On top, they made a slight cosmetic improvement to the interface buttons, which may help reduce moisture penetration. That's about all that appears to have changed on top, so let's take a quick look underneath the mowers. The cutting deck seems to be very similar between both models. I also noticed it's probably time for me to clean the blades in the Luba 1. You can see how they freely rotate in the newer model, but from what I saw, it didn't seem to affect the cut quality for the lawn. Anyway, from the looks of it, that appears to be all that I can tell that has changed, so let's finish getting the Luba 2 set up. Nothing major that I'm aware of has changed with the charging base, so I won't spend too much time covering that. The RTK reference station, which helps enhance positioning accuracy, or in other words, helps Luba locate itself, does appear to have some changes. It has a much slimmer profile and looks and feels a little more robust than the previous generation. Since I had the most success with mounting the previous RTK station on the side of my deck's railing, I decided to do the same for the new one. However, with the new vision module, I could probably get away with mounting this in a more convenient location. After everything was installed, it was finally time to start charging the Luba 2 and going through the setup process, which was quick and simple. I won't bore you through the entire process, but it takes less than a minute or so to set up using your smartphone, and there may be a firmware update or two that you have to complete.
Upgrade successful.
After the Luba 2 was updated and connected to my account, I could then create the wireless perimeter around my backyard. This is where I began to get concerned because with the Luba 1, I spent hours having to reteach the perimeter or relocate the RTK or the charging base because I would constantly lose my navigation positioning with the RTK. To my surprise, after mapping the majority of my backyard, I did not lose positioning not one time. I was shocked because this was such a pain in the butt with the Luba 1, but I didn't want to get my hopes up too soon as I still needed to test if the Luba 2 could make it to my front yard without any issues since I have overhanging trees on the side of my property. But before we get to the front yard, I wanted to perform some quick cutting tests in the backyard.
Start recharging.
Just so you know, for some of the mower's footage in this video, I will be speeding up to avoid making this video really long.
Start charging.
Also, since things were going well, I went ahead and installed the Luba garage, which is not included with the Luba 2, but the one for my Luba 1 charging base fit the new base perfectly. Currently, my yard is full of different types of grass and weeds, and it's still a little early in the spring season when I was filming this, but the grass is a little over 5 inches tall, so I felt this would still be a good time to test the mower's cutting ability. Using the app's manual control feature, I ran the mower back and forth over a small patch of thick growth to see how well it would chop things down. Overall, it looked like the Luba 2 has the same ability to mow just as well as the Luba 1. Afterwards, I set up a mow style and set the configuration for tall grass, which also tells the mower to ignore the ultrasonic sensors and rely only on the front bumper so that tall grass does not falsely trip the obstacle detection feature.
Start working.
At first, I kept a close eye on the mower just to see if any issues would occur, and then I noticed it seemed like the mower knew I was recording it and it was posing for the camera. But no, it actually seems to do a lot of stopping and going when it's cutting the perimeter of the yard to make sure it does not bump into anything. One of my favorite features is the ability to monitor the live video feed from the Vision module. This is really cool if you're away from home and you want to see what's going on with the robotic mower. After seeing that the mower was working just fine without me doing anything or making any changes, I figured this was a good time for me to knock out some other tasks while Luba was working. Once Luba was done mowing the backyard, it automatically returned to the charging base without any issues. So far, everything was going great, which I was not expecting at all. But I was also being a little careful not to push the limits of this new tech because I guess you can say I was a little traumatized from the first experience and really did not want this to turn into a long day of troubleshooting. But since that's part of my job, I went ahead and modified the perimeter of my backyard to have the mower go completely under some of my trees, which was definitely not something you wanted to do with the Luba 1. I was shocked. During the entire mapping process, I did not run into one connection or positioning failure. So I was like, okay, let's continue to push the limits by mapping the front yard. After mapping my front yard, again, no issues. I was very impressed, but still concerned about what might happen when I take the leash off and let Luba route itself to my front yard. But before I could do that, I needed to create what they call a channel from my backyard to the front yard so Luba knew how to navigate properly from one area to the other, which if you look at the app is the blue line that is getting created.
Channel complete.
As a quick test, I had Luba attempt to mow the front yard so that I could see as it was navigating through the channel if it would run into my fence or the house on the way. For the most part, it handled the test okay, but at times it seemed like it was being extra careful or double checking its surroundings or something, but eventually it made it to the front yard zone without colliding into anything or getting too far off track, which I guess is the most important part. So by this point, I was ready to fully test mowing the front yard, but this was the exact time my area was starting to experience the solar eclipse, so I took a quick lunch break. Once the sun was fully revealed again, Luba was ready to go back to work. My front yard has a slight incline, which was another problematic area for Luba 1, but Luba 2 seemed to handle it just fine, even here where I thought I was going to have to jump in and give it some help or reteach this area. After Luba finished mowing the front yard, I wanted to see how well it would do making it back to the charging base in my backyard, since it would have to use the channel I created. Again, it somewhat had a strange way of navigating back, which I'm not sure if this was due to it losing signal to the RTK and having to rely solely on its vision module or what, but eventually it navigated into the backyard without colliding into anything, which again is the most important part, even though it wasn't pretty. I think also making the layout of the channel a bit smoother instead of a lot of minor left and right movements may improve that process.
Start charging.
After mowing the front and the backyard, I wanted to take a closer look at some other features. As we know, the cutting deck is similar to the Luba 1, but I wanted to see what the blades looked like while they were in motion. It's interesting to see that the blade did spin back and forth initially before they start to rotate at the full RPM. I still think being able to move the cutting deck height via the app is a neat feature, since some robotic mowers have a physical knob or mechanism that you have to use to change the cutting height. I tested a few steep slope areas of my yard and rough terrain, and Luba handled those scenarios without any issues. They claim the mower can handle 38-degree slopes, which is a few degrees more than the Luba 1. When it comes to security, they've improved the options available, such as adding an area for you to add a tracking device such as an Apple AirTag. Noise-wise, just like the Luba 1, you won't be waking any of your neighbors when this mower is at work. Since the rain sensor looked a little different on the Luba 2, I wanted to retest the rain detect feature. Within a few seconds, after detecting water, the Luba returned back to the charging base without any issues. The obstacle avoidance feature seems to be working like it should as well. So what are my final thoughts about the Luba 2? I think they did a great job improving the navigation positioning issues that the Luba 1 had. I do wish there was a way to receive a little more feedback within the app when Luba is avoiding an obstacle or having to reroute or adjust itself, as sometimes instead of just moving straight like you might think Luba would, it may stop, readjust, or maybe even do a 360 turn and then continue along the path. I usually only see this strange behavior when it's going around the perimeter of the yard, using a channel to get from one zone to the next, or avoiding an obstacle. But this isn't a big deal, just something I think would be cool to have viewing access to in the app. Another interesting thing I noticed, which isn't really an issue and something they caution about with the vision module, is it's recommended to mow only when you have decent lighting outside, as if it is too dark, the vision module is not able to see as well. So then Luba is forced to rely on the RTK technology, which is basically making it function like a Luba 1, where it may pause until the lighting or signal conditions improve. Other than those 2 points, I think overall, the Luba 2 is a great improvement over the Luba 1, and if you were in the market for a robotic mower, it may be worth checking out. Of course, just like the Luba 1, they have different model options available depending on your yard size and needs. The Luba 2 model I'm reviewing is the Luba 3000, which will run you around $2,500. To most, that may seem really steep, and you could technically buy a decent riding lawnmower for that price, but if you're like me and want to eliminate or reduce the amount of lawn care you have to worry about every year, you may find it's worth the cost. Anyway, hopefully this video was useful for those interested in learning more about the Luba 2 robotic mower, or interesting for others who are just now discovering this technology. Also, speaking of discovering, if you're just discovering this channel, you can watch some of our other videos by clicking the left video thumbnail, and for everyone else, YouTube thinks you may be interested in the video on the right. Well, that's all for now. I'll see you in the next one.